Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the State Department. A couple very quick items at the top, and then I'll take your questions. This falls in the "in case you missed it" category, but just wanted to call attention to the fact yesterday in Laos, President Obama announced a new State Department / Peace Corps initiative called English for All. English for All and its new website, which is englishforall.state.gov, will serve as a resource for foreign audiences interested in learning about the range of English programming offered by and supported by the U.S. government. It will also be a helpful resource to those Americans who may be looking to serve their country by teaching English abroad. And worth noting that U.S. government's English instruction programs provide opportunities to learn English to millions worldwide every year. Also, I just wanted to make note of the fact that tomorrow, on Friday, September 9th, the State Department will team up with foreign diplomats to clean beaches across the United States. This is part, or in recognition rather, of International Coastal Cleanup Day. This initiative will support the goals of our Ocean 2016 conference, which is coming up next week. In collaboration with the Ocean Conservancy and its local partners, State Department personnel from the Office of Foreign Missions, together with the Foreign Consular Corps, will clean beaches in Chicago, in Galveston, in Kahuku, in Key Biscayne, in New York, and in Santa Monica, as well as Seattle. That's it. Matt, over to you.
Where?
All right, sorry.
What was that?
Chicago, you know where that is.
Yeah.
Illinois, Galveston,
I'm glad
Texas,
that the
Kahuku,
Great Lakes-
Hawaii.
the
Yes,
Great Lakes
that's
aren't being
exactly,
ignored.
yes. Which is, by the way, the Great Lakes have more coastline than all of the, or either coast combined. I learned that. It's a fun fact.
Absolutely fascinating.
So I think I've answered all your questions with that, right?
I think it's a very worthy,
You got me.
very worthy endeavor.
Thank you.
Just on your first one, what is the last letter in the word of the in the name of the country where this English achieved?
Laos.
Yeah.
Did I mispronounce that? I apologize.
You can say either, but
Okay.
you didn't need to correct yourself. by
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
dropping
I
the
learned the other
S.
day, again, that you were supposed to drop the S, but,
It depends.
okay.
Can.
Again,
All right, so can we move to matters of
yes,
perhaps more urgent substance?
sure.
Syria, what is going on? Apparently, Foreign Minister Lavrov has arrived in Geneva.
Well, I
already.
can't speak for the whereabouts of Foreign Minister Lavrov. All I can say is I don't have anything to update you on with regard to possible meetings. We continue to, and indeed the Secretary spoke earlier today with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we're continuing to work through some of the remaining issues that we have before we can reach an agreement on a way forward with regard to Syria. And those questions, those issues continue to be discussed, and until we get to a point where we can feel that we can reach a resolution of those issues, we'll continue to work through them.
Well, does that mean that those issues have to be resolved before there would be a meeting?
No. But I would also, and certainly not, and we've seen, obviously,
Because that-
indicative of the meeting he had last week in China, that, certainly Secretary Kerry's willing to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov to discuss remaining issues. However, I think it's our belief that, our belief that the remaining issues are at a technical level that need to be addressed within our interagency and also by some of the working groups who have been working on these issues for some time now. So I guess to sum it up, I mean, we're just not at a point where we believe it's, we can confirm A, a meeting, and B, that it's worth his while to go have a meeting.
Well, you just referred to interagency. So is some of the holdup here internal to the administration? The
Well, I mean, look, I
differences-
mean, any agreement that we reach would have to be reached through the interagency. I mean, obvious in some sense.
Right, but in the past, people have spoken about, or the reason that there wasn't, the reason given by an official, perhaps more than one official, for there not being an agreement reached in China was that the Russians had walked back on some things that you all had thought had been previously agreed to. And now, maybe I'm just
Look, I don't wanna-
over-interpreting your comment. It seems as though not only is there a problem with the Russians, there's also a problem in the interagency in the United States.
I just think, Matt, it's, these are difficult processes. The Russians have conditions they want to see met and addressed. We have our own. And in reaching our own consensus with regard to a text or a way forward that we can agree on, we continue to have those conversations. We're just not there yet. I don't want to put the onus on either side at this point. I just want to, I would just say that when we get there, when we have a reason that we believe a meeting would be, rather when we've reached a point where we believe a meeting would be useful, then we'll announce that.
Mark, is this, almost going to happen kind of meeting, I mean, this kind of feeling, does that indicate that you guys are getting closer or farther apart?
I don't.
Because the
Yeah,
secretary spoke to
I mean, it's a fair
yesterday.
question. I just, it indicates that
Right.
these are complicated
Right.
discussions, and that, and they're detailed discussions. And rather than rush to an agreement, we want to make sure that it meets and addresses all our concerns and all of our goals and objectives going into it. And so, it's painstaking to some degree, but it's part of the process. So I don't want to say we're going back, we're stepping away. I think that overall, we wouldn't still be in it if we didn't believe that it was still possible.
I have a couple more.
Yeah, please.
What are some of these technical issues that the Russians may have walked away from or walked back from?
We've been fairly circumspect about talking about those in detail, partly to protect, the confidential discussions that we're having with Russia. Once we reach an agreement, we'll talk about all the aspects of that agreement. But until we get there, we've been very broad, and that's deliberate.
And 2 points, if I could have your comment on. One, the Syrian army retook a neighborhood of Ramusa and Aleppo earlier today. It gives them a broader base from which to attack. And second, the Turks are saying that they veto, basically, any participation by Kurdish forces to liberate Raqqa. Your comment on both issues.
The second question again,
The
I'm
second
sorry,
question,
about Turkish.
the Turks want to have some sort of a veto power over the participation of any Kurdish forces in the upcoming effort, whenever it happens, to liberate Raqqa.
Roka, okay. First, in the first part of your question, I've already forgotten what that is. So sorry.
The Syrian
been a long
army
week.
retook the neighborhood of Ramusa.
Oh, right,
and
exactly. Look, I mean, it's not for me to really talk about, at a tactical level. We've seen those reports. I would just broadly state that, we don't see any kind of military solution to the situation in Syria. And that also pertains to the situation in Aleppo. It's why we're pushing so hard for a political resolution. And, we've seen tactical shifts from day to day. We've seen these latest reports. It only raises our concern that the civilians within Aleppo continue to suffer.
The reason I asked this was because they had.
I'll let you
sorry,
know.
Barbara.
It's okay.
It was the opposition that basically through a sort of a blitz attack a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, took this area, including
Exactly.
the military academy and so on.
And
at
I think-
the time, you did not express a great deal of concern that there was an attack by the opposition.
Well, I just think there's again, it's a complex battle space. We've said that many times, and it's also a very intense battle space, and there's a give and take. And so I'm also not going to say that this is somehow some sea change tactically. I just don't know, for one. And two, it just, we've seen these shifts take place over a period of months now. Please, Barbara.
Yeah, just because this whole area, Ramusa area, is part of the ceasefire talks in terms of how you would get aid into
Right.
Aleppo, does this not affect the negotiations? It surely must have some ramifications there.
Without getting into specifics, not necessarily because, if we were to reach an agreement, there would obviously be, and we've talked about this in broad terms, certainly a pause in the conflict or in the fighting before a cessation could take place. And no, in the sense that the fighting would cease, if that's what you're talking about. If your broader question or your question is whether this complicates that Syria, or the regime rather, would think that it can somehow take Aleppo, that's really a question I can't answer. We've seen the regime continue to press the fight to take Aleppo. What we would say to that is there is no military solution to the conflict in Syria, and it's up to Russia to convince the regime that that's the case.
Just a quick question on the interagency. Is that objections from the Pentagon with regards to
I'm not
joint
going to
operations
characterize
with
it.
the Russians,
All
given
I'm
how
trying to say
Carter
is,
talked
and I
about
also
the
don't want to
Russians
say
the
that
other day?
there's, sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah.
talk over you, Barbara. I don't want to say that there's some kind of interagency battle. All I'm saying is, as we look at the remaining issues, that's going to be a discussion that we have with the interagency, and that just makes sense because it touches on the equities of the interagency.
Mark, how much
Please.
of a complicating factor is it? The comment today by the Turkish foreign minister that for a deal, Turkey will not accept under any conditions any transition deal that leaves Assad in power.
Well, again, I think we've, in our own position is that we don't believe that Assad can be a legitimate leader in the long term for Syria. I think ultimately that, I think ultimately this is a question that Syrians need to answer, and through the negotiation process that we want to see restarted in Geneva. And ultimately how that transition takes place, how long Assad stays in power before a government can, or a transitional government can take power. Those are all questions that need to be answered. Our own belief is that he lacks all legitimacy to be the leader of Syria, but ultimately that's a question that the Syrians themselves are going to have to address.
Could you?
Please.
If the reports are true that Lavrov is in Geneva, is this in any case, does the U.S. feel that this could be a propaganda issue by the Russians to kind of have one up on what the U.S. and show that the U.S. maybe is not trying to get a deal on this?
I won't speak to Foreign Minister Lavrov's travel, his schedule, his itinerary. All I can say, speak for, is our own goal, and that is to try to settle the remaining issues that we have in reaching an agreement. And once we feel like we're closer to a settlement and a meeting would be valuable, then we'll have that meeting.
And are the issues, John Kerry, when he was in China, spoke about a couple of tough issues. Are these the same issues that that are preventing this deal right now? Or is it something else?
I think, broadly speaking, they're the same issues.
I asked you about the Turkish Foreign Defense Minister, Fikri Ishak, said that.
Oh, about
they-
Raqqa?
Yeah,
I mean-
they want to work with you to liberate Raqqa, but they will not accept the Popular Defense Committee, Kurdish committees. So do you have a
I
position
haven't
on
seen
that?
those comments. We've been supportive of those Kurdish groups in northern Syria who have been really effective in taking the fight to Daesh. We're going to continue that support, but I haven't seen his comments. So
But
far from
in
that.
principle, you do reject any kind of veto by the Turks on the liberation of
Look, we
Raqqa.
continue to have discussions, regular dialogue with Turkey. We are working closely with Turkey, and indeed, as we're supporting its recent offensive around to secure its own border with Syria. We'll continue those discussions going forward. Yep.
The KRG Prime Minister led a delegation to Baghdad last week And among the topics that he discussed with the Iraqi Prime Minister was the KRG's intent to hold a referendum on independence. And reportedly, the Iraqi Prime Minister didn't object. So if the Iraqi government accepts that the KRG will hold a referendum on independence, does the United States also concur in that view, that that is acceptable?
I have not seen those remarks. I'm unaware of that meeting. Certainly, these are discussions at the core that need to take place between the Kurdish regional authorities and the government of Iraq, but our position hasn't changed.
Is your position that if the Iraqi government accepts a Kurdish referendum on Kurdish independence, that's also acceptable to the United States, contingent on the approval of Baghdad?
Again, I think these are what our emphasis is on is the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iraq. These are discussions that are ongoing, but we don't have any comment. Please.
Afghanistan?
Yep.
Do you have any word on the fate of the American professor kidnapped near the American University in Kabul last month?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot to say. You're talking about the U.S. citizen who was kidnapped in Kabul. Yeah. We're limited in what we can say because we don't have a Privacy Act waiver in this case. Obviously, the safety and protection of U.S. citizens overseas is our top priority. We're going to continue to monitor this incident very closely, but I can't really speak further to it.
Has next of kin been notified? Can you tell us that?
Again, speaking broadly, certainly, and I'm legally bound not to speak specifically to this case, but that would normally be standard operating procedures. We reach out to the family of missing Americans and work with them in it and provide any support we could and answer their questions, et cetera.
And then have any U.S. diplomats participated in any decision-making councils relating to a possible rescue attempt of the professor?
So over there, I would not speak to any possible efforts that might be taken to secure his release. That's not something I would address. Please, Michael, hey.
One on Russia.
Yeah.
According to Foreign Ministry, Russian Foreign Ministry Lavrov in his phone call with Senator Kerry or Secretary Kerry the other day brought to Secretary Kerry's attention an open letter from pilot Yeroshenko's mother that she had sent to President Obama actually. But Lavrov said he brought this to Kerry's attention during their talks and expressed hope that it would be resolved in a positive manner. Do you know, has Secretary Kerry read the letter?
One more time, the letter pertaining to?
Yeroshenko's mother sent an email to President Obama expressing concerns about her, about her child in prison, and then
Right. I'd have to look into it. I
Lavrov
wasn't aware of the letter or that it was raised in the bilat, so I'll have to take the question. Please, in the back.
My name is Kausar Javed, Dunia News, correspondent in Washington, Pakistan.
Okay. Welcome.
The relation of Pakistan and United States is at lowest level. What really are the challenges?
Well, I would refute the premise of the question. I don't believe they're at their lowest level. I would say that our relationship with Pakistan is strong and in our mutual interest and also in the interest of the region. It's not to say it's not sometimes a challenging relationship, but we have a range of issues, including counterterrorism, that we work quite closely with Pakistan on. We believe, again, our relationship is strong.
Sir, Secretary Kerry recently visited South Asia. He went to Bangladesh and India, but skipped Pakistan. It clearly indicates the interest of United States in that region. Sir, what really was the reason for skipping Pakistan in that important visit?
Look, I mean, it doesn't clearly indicate anything about our relationship with Pakistan. The secretary has, I think we would all agree in this room, a very intense travel schedule. He's been to Pakistan recently. He speaks often to senior Pakistani leadership. Specifically, he was in India for the strategic and commercial dialogue, and took the opportunity to also visit Bangladesh. I think the first time he's been there. But as we've said many times, there's no zero-sum game here. We need to have a very strong and robust relationship with India, and we do, the world's largest democracy. And we also want to have a strong relationship with Pakistan. It's in the interest of the region to do so.
The U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee today rejected the proposal of putting sanctions on Pakistan for not taking actions against Haqqani Network, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Lashkar-e-Taiba. So what kind of discussions are going on with Pakistan regarding these terror groups?
Well, our discussions continue to focus on the fact that we're urging the government of Pakistan to take concerted action against safe havens and terrorist groups that threaten other countries in the region. And we've been very clear about that. And we have seen them attempt to address it. We want to see more action taken, but, it continues to be a topic of conversation with them. Please, sir.
I want to go back to
Yep.
Russia. Well, kind of Russia.
Kind of Russia.
You will have seen probably that the Russians say that both the Israelis and the Palestinians have agreed in principle to have a meeting to try to get things started again in Moscow.
Yep.
What's your take on this?
Well, our take, not my take, our take
Well,
is...
your, meaning
that's right.
the royal you.
That's exactly right. Thank you. Look, it's obviously up to the parties to decide if they want to do a meeting and when and where that meeting takes place. So obviously, I'd refer you to them for comment. As we made clear in the Quartet report, we continue to call on both sides to demonstrate their commitment to a two-state solution and to lay the groundwork for a successful negotiation. I think we're concerned that things might be moving in the opposite direction, given, on the one hand, and we've expressed our concern about this, ongoing Israeli settlement activity, but equally, we've been troubled by the fact that, or by the incitement to violence. I think most recently, the Fatah Facebook post that glorified the terrorist attacks on the Munich Olympics, where 11 innocent Israelis athletes were killed. So we are concerned and remain focused on encouraging all sides to take the necessary actions and steps that will allow for a meaningful progress toward a two-state solution. So, I mean, we welcome talks. It's up for both sides to decide if those take place, but it's also about laying the groundwork so that any talks would be successful and be able to lead to negotiations.
Yeah, but it's basically since the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton, the U.S. has had a monopoly on hosting, mediating, getting involved in the peace process, and you have successfully beaten back attempts by other countries, Russia included, and then France, to have, to host their own meetings. So I'm just wondering if you don't have the same opposition to this. You're not concerned at all that
Look,
the U.S. might be losing its primacy and.
Not at all. And the Secretary remains fully engaged in this effort. He speaks to Prime Minister Netanyahu frequently. We speak to the Palestinian Authority frequently. He speaks to leadership in the region, which is also vital to any eventual peace effort. But I think it's, again, it's up to the parties to decide when and where they meet. I just would reiterate that we think there needs to be groundwork laid before effective, fruitful negotiations can take place.
In other words, you think that this is going to go nowhere?
I'm not going to say that. I'm just saying what
Well,
I
it
said.
sounds like it, because
Well,
you
I
say that,
said,
one, that you say that the groundwork needs to be laid before you can have a meeting that amounts to anything. At the same time, you say that things are moving in the opposite direction, which this all suggests to me, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't think I am, that you don't think that this Moscow meeting is necessarily a good idea. It's
I
not
won't-
ripe.
I'll leave it where I just left it.
As a quartet member, and when you say we, you're referring to the United States
Right.
in your previous answer.
Right.
So Russia is a quartet member, but it's
They are.
hosting it's hosting this thing, but not in its role as a quartet member.
Don't believe so. If that's wrong, I'll correct it.
And would you be observers at this meeting?
I'm not sure what our level of participation would be. So I'll hesitate. Anyway, it's not set in stone yet, that I understand, but, obviously we'll be following it closely.
And does taking this decision to host the conference that wasn't premised in the quartet report in any way call into question Russia's role within the quartet, if it's got having an independent initiative on the same topic?
I wouldn't say that. And I don't want to cast too much aspersion on this effort, not at all. All I was saying in my response to Matt was, we need to make sure that any talks, face-to-face talks, have the right climate in which to succeed in.
So what is the groundwork that needs to be done? Like what?
Well, again, I gave two examples of actions that are having the opposite effect. So we want to see de-escalation by both sides in the process, and there's any number of things that they can steps they can take that would lead to that. I'm not going to give them a step-by-step roadmap to that. That's up for them to decide to do and undertake. But it's our belief that, and this speaks broadly to any peace negotiations, but certainly in this case, if you don't have the right climate for them to be successful, then it's not worth having them.
I have a couple more questions
Please.
on the issue. First of all, do you have any comment on the reports suggesting that the president of the Palestinian Authority may have been a KGB agent?
None
I
whatsoever.
mean,
I
in
mean,
all
we-
fairness, he was the head of the Palestinian-Soviet friendship for a long, long time.
I think those are questions you can ask him or the Palestinian Authority.
All right, let me ask you a couple of other things. The Palestinian Supreme Court in Ramallah postponed the municipal election. Is that something that you encourage or frown upon? What is your position on this?
Our position, and you're right, I mean, they froze preparatory work for the municipal elections. I think they have 2 or 3 election-related issues to decide on. Look, we're monitoring it, we're following it closely. It's not for us to litigate this matter on behalf of the courts. In general, we support democratic process, and we've been active in supporting the development of Palestinian democratic institutions. But, this is a matter for them to resolve.
And finally, the IMF issued a very abysmal report on the situation of Palestinian development, saying that growth has been, stalled because of, settlement activities and closures and all these things, and Israeli, practices in the West Bank. Do you have you seen the report? First of all?
I have not read the report. I'm aware of it.
Okay, you're aware of it.
But, look, we highlighted our same concerns in the quartet report. And those concerns specifically relate to constraints on Palestinian economic development and growth. And generally speaking, we remain committed to seeing strong economic development in the West Bank.
And will
and Gaza.
these English schools will also cover places like Gaza and the West Bank and so on that you started?
Oh, did I start off at I
Right.
would assume so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just
Please.
said that
What did I
about the
say?
Russian initiative, you said you didn't, excuse me, you said you didn't want to cast too much aspersion on it? Does that mean that you only want to cast some
I just-
aspersion on it? I'm trying to figure
fair
out
point.
your level
No, I'm not
of
trying to
unhappiness
aspersion,
with-
yes.
with
No, I'm
the
not trying
Russians.
to, look, I don't want to, all I'm simply saying is that we want to see any negotiations, any talks going forward, begin on the right footing, in the right climate. That's all I'm saying.
And then,
that footing does not yet exist.
We've seen,
So these talks are inopportune.
again, I'll stop where I said.
And
where I
then
stopped.
the Israelis have started building this underground barrier to prevent tunneling from Gaza. Do you have anything to say about that?
I don't. This is to stop what, what's that, tunnels, right? I mean, look, I mean, we said before that obviously Israel has a right to take steps to protect its citizens, and we respect that right. And as long as these tunnels exist and are used to carry out attacks on innocent Israelis, we support efforts to address those concerns.
I mean, on the same issue, Mark, the Israelis in the last just few days, they killed an unarmed Palestinian who did not threaten them. In fact, they said they killed him by mistake. They shot today someone who was coming back from school, in a refugee camp outside Ramallah. They shot someone in Gaza who was also walking, a teenager, and so on. So it's Israel is taking some, almost on a daily basis, unprovoked attack, committing an unprovoked attack against the Palestinians and so on.
Saeed,
And I understood
yeah.
that you began by, pointing to the Fatah Post, for instance.
But I also spoke about ongoing settlement activity.
Right.
I think with respect to these incidents that you mentioned, I don't know the particulars. We've always said that while we understand and respect the right of Israeli security forces to take action to protect Israeli citizens, we would always call on them to exercise restraint as they carry out their duties. That said, I think it also speaks to something I referred to as well, which is that we don't want to see escalating tensions. And right now, I think we've got an atmosphere of tension, and that obviously exacerbates the situation. Please, sir.
Yes, on North Korea.
Yes. Oh, sure, go ahead, and then I get to you.
Have you seen any change in, there have been a couple of major issues that have prevented Netanyahu and Abbas from meeting, and one of them is this issue of no preconditions and the stopping of settlement building. Have you seen any change in? You're talking about other, I think, slightly other issues in terms of laying the groundwork. But have you seen any change in their positions that would make it seem like this meeting would actually happen?
Certainly, with regard to settlement activity, it's been, frankly, to the contrary. In terms of no preconditions, I think, at least I've seen from the Israeli government, their continued commitment to that. So I would refer you to them to speak to whether there's any change in that. Please? No, North Korea, right?
Yes. Several Japanese lawmakers arrived in North Korea today under the premise of conducting sports exchanges, given sort of the tensions in the region and with North Korea. Do you think this is inappropriate?
They arrived where? I apologize.
In North Korea. Japanese lawmakers.
Okay. And these are sports exchanges?
So they arrived with the intent of conducting sports exchanges, but they might be meeting with higher level officials.
I'm not aware of these meetings. Certainly it's up to the Japanese government to decide its level of engagement with North Korea. Our only concern is that this is a pretty opaque regime that has showed no effort to address in any way, shape, or form the international community's ongoing concerns about its nuclear program. And while we don't discount the effect of people-to-people exchanges, which it sounds like this falls into that category, it certainly doesn't address the broader concerns we continue to have about North Korea. And we continue to work closely with Japan, with other allies and partners in the region to address those concerns. Yes, Tijender.
At a press conference in Athens, Greece, the EU has announced that there will be a EU-Arab summit on November 3 and 4. They have already said 35 participants confirmed. Will there be a U.S. presence, and at what level?
Nothing to announce in terms of U.S. presence, and I'd have to refer you to the Greeks. I just don't have any details or any reaction to it thus far. I'll have to look into it.
Have you received the invitation to participate?
I'm not aware that we
Nothing.
have.
Okay. And the other, India?
Sure, of course.
Have you got any update on the trilateral summit that was announced soon, India, Afghanistan, during Secretary Kerry's visit from India?
It's tentatively scheduled, I think, for September 21st on the margins of the UN General Assembly, but I don't have any further details. Yes, sir. Oh, go ahead, Matt, and then I'll get to you.
No,
Oh, he ceded the floor to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Sir, I was talking about the Foreign Relations Committee meeting today, chaired by the Senator Bob Corker. So the committee observed that Pakistan is expanding its nuclear program just to deal with the Indian aggression. And there is a threat of nuclear war between two countries, and U.S. government should play its role of mediation to normalize the tensions between the two countries. So what really is stopping United States to act as a mediator?
Well, again, I mean, I don't know what kind of formal, if he's talking about some kind of formal mediation role. I mean, we act
So the
as.
senators were observed in that
Yeah.
meeting today, U.S. senators,
I mean-
that U.S. should play the role of mediator between the Pakistan and India.
I mean, we strongly encourage in all of our dealings with either India or Pakistan, stronger relations between the two countries. It's clearly in the security interests of the region that they work to de-escalate tensions and that they have dialogue. And that's something we constantly encourage for just that, or out of just that concern, which is that we don't want to see tensions escalate, spiral out of control, and lead to some kind of incident. Again, it's important for the two countries, the two governments, to maintain strong, cordial, and productive relations. Yes, sir. You were late. Yes. I'm sorry. Do I have to consent or?
Yeah, but
What's up?
the IAEA's
Oh.
latest report on Iran is out today.
It's confidential report, you mean? It's,
Well, it's not
No,
so
I-
confidential. I just read it, so it's not
Yes,
particularly
but-
confidential. And I'm
Go ahead.
sure that you have read it, or if you haven't read it, that people in this building have read it and know what it says. And it basically says that, in general, they're sticking to the terms of the agreement. But it also points out a potential problem, and that is that the Iranians have begun manufacturing rotors that can be used in centrifuges, which they are allowed to do, but within limits. And I'm just wondering, if the report points this out as a area of potential concern. Is this a concern for the United States too?
so the report does remain confidential until the IAEA releases it. Let me continue, which I think will be during the Board of Governors meeting September 19th to 23rd. So I don't want to get into the details. As you note, though, it accurately portrays the status of Iran's nuclear program, we believe, and including the fact that, as you note, Iran continues to meet its commitments under the JCPOA. As for the specific concern that you raised, I'll try to speak to it in greater detail. At this point, we're still looking at the report, assessing it. As you said, it's not it's not prohibited. So I can't say to this point, without having looked at the report, whether we're concerned about it and to what degree we're concerned about it. So I will ask for your patience on that. Is that it? Oh. Yes, please.
Today in Cairo, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Gheit, accused Iran of meddling in Arab affairs and destabilizing the region and so on. I wonder if you saw the comments, and I wonder if you would comment on that. Do you think that Iran does play that kind of meddling role that destabilizes the region?
I mean, I haven't seen the specific comments he made. I know there's been a bit of a war of words between Saudi Arabia and Iran this past week regarding, stemming from concerns over the Hajj.
Yeah.
And we've spoken to that. I think broadly speaking, and we've been very clear about this in the wake of the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, while that agreement addressed a very serious but specific concern about Iran's behavior, one that would have caused, without doubt, greater tension in the region and posed a real risk to the region. We haven't seen any kind of sea change in Iran's broader behavior in the region. We would hope that it would play a more constructive role But to this point, we haven't seen any indication that it is pursuing that path. That's it. Thanks, guys.